Hello, everybody, and welcome to PlantTherapy.live. We are back with you again for another week. My name is Ray,
And I'm Pache.
and we have some more great conversation to continue again this week. Hey, I just did want to remind everybody that we are on Spotify and iHeartRadio, and you can find all the links on our website at PlantTherapy.live, and you can listen directly from the website now. And we do this live every week. Pache?
I am loving it. Every Sunday night, you'll find us here. And make sure you tune in, subscribe.
Love it. PlantTherapy.live on Facebook, and we talk about our products and experiences with them, and we're not sponsored in any way by any company. We always keep it real at PlantTherapy.live. And we're continuing our series here on some basic grow information, some equipment and environment and growing styles as we move through the weeks. But I did have a look at some of our analytics, Pache, so you'll be interested to know that we now have listeners from Belgium, Ireland, the U.S., and Quebec, and Nova Scotia as well. So
cool.
we get indicators on a map as we get listeners across the different areas. So I just wanted to point that out.
Well, hello
and
to
this week-
everyone.
yeah, hello to everybody. And special shout out this week to some listeners in the USA, God Country, 2 Speedy 1, and Turtle. Shout out to you boys. And our topics tonight, as we get deeper into this grow series, is environment. We're going to talk about some environment stuff, which is super important. Some nutrient talk, and got some stuff we've been using. We're going to talk a little bit about that we've mentioned before, and kind of how to identify some deficiencies. And then some kind of growing styles if we have time at the end. Again, it's another beefy episode. Lots to talk about. But first, a little question for you there, Pache. You were a little, you and I are a little late this week getting on the air. It seems somebody may have forgotten their anniversary.
Well, no, I definitely did not forget my anniversary. 100%. That is a lie. That is not true. I just happened to schedule a show on Sundays, and my anniversary fell on a Sunday this year. And next time that happens to one of us, we should maybe go live on Saturday or something like that. See what happens, or maybe any other day.
Yeah, too
But I'm
funny.
here.
Anyway,
The show must go
absolutely.
on.
Yeah. So how are you?
I'm doing good, man. I'm doing really good. My grow is going really well. I've got 4 little purple kush, and they are into their 5th week now. And so I've last weekend I topped them, and we'll get into that very shortly this episode. And this week I started low stress training and bending and tying them down. Because I want to shape them a certain way, and we'll talk about or not mine, but I use a mainlining manifolding technique from Nug Buckets, and so we'll be talking about that later on today or tonight, and so things are going really well there, and I got a new order, some neem oil, and
Nice.
got some more pest strips, so just to keep my arsenal full of weapons.
Yeah. Are the fungus gnats still a thing? Still a thing, or?
They're still around, but they feel a lot more manageable. I feel like the whole situation is trending in the right direction.
Good. Awesome. And have you tried Thelma and Louise yet? Curious to know.
Yes, so I have tried. Thelma and Louise they were my second grow, and the White Widow strain, same as the first. And yes, I have tried.
So
I've been.
just hold on. So just a recap, right? This is Thelma and Louise that you harvested at 65 days, if I remember correctly.
That's right. That's right.
Okay. Yep. So go
So
ahead.
I let the trichomes amber a little bit more because I wanted to try a difference between the 60-day and the 65-day. and see if there was a little bit more couch lock, a little bit more sedation, just so I can have some choice, right?
Hmm.
Something for late in the evening, or whether you're going to go out and play some golf or something like that. It really depends. Yeah, so things are going really well there. It tastes so sweet. It smells so sweet, and I am just loving it, man. I really am. I'm not tired of it yet.
Did you get the feeling that you're looking for though? Is it more of a coach lock?
I
Like
don't
like
know if I can
did you get what
say
you
that.
wanted out of the waiting the 5 days this time? Because I wonder, is 5 days enough, right? I mean, maybe it needs to be pushed a little more next time around.
Yeah, like I might have been able to tell if it was 55 days versus 65 days.
Hmm.
But I'm noticing eh, very little tolerance because I've been smoking that strain for a few months. So now my tolerance, I feel, has also been building up.
Right.
So I am looking forward to harvesting and curing the purple kush, and then I move on to the next one. I'm always now looking forward to the next one I find.
Yeah, you motivated me to same kind of situation. I'm getting a little bit bored now with the White Widow. So I'll be looking at other things as well, but we'll talk about that. Myself, I did have a pretty good week. Some of my nugs are off to a really nice start. That mint chocolate chip, geez, it's just the branches are already starting to bend under the weight, and like we're just into week 5. So it's been great to kind of watch that happen. They're rock solid. I touched a few of them today and squaz them up.
That's what you want, man.
Oh yeah, just super happy.
Are they getting frosty?
They're just starting to really get frosty now, although just like last time, the frost kind of comes a little bit later as and it's weird because I'm not used to seeing nugs that are that big and dense without that many crystals on them just yet. Like they're still just starting to really form. So
Ooh, that's
yeah, so
exciting.
yeah, it is a pretty exciting. Yeah, but and the White Widow is just growing just strong and steady, just like White Widow does. So was in today and got some care done. That pH water treatment that I've been doing to keep that
Mm-hmm.
little bit of powdery mildew, that seems to really be keeping things at bay. So I've just
Sweet.
continued with that. So that's kind of been working well for me. But as I work on them, I just I'd love to have the ability to be able to do a scrog. That's the missing piece to my equation. I'm just so used to working with a
Mm-hmm.
scrog, not having the ability to use one in my current situation just yet is really bothering me. It's causing I wish for it all the time, so I'm gonna have to come up with a plan there.
Like
And of
tomato
course,
cages or something like that, or
well, it's just I'd have to either move to like a recirculating system, so the plants wouldn't, so I wouldn't have to move the plants and fill the buckets
mm,
and whatnot manually. I mean, that's an option. I don't really want to go down that road because I like to keep everything clean, and I'm used to cleaning things once a week and or at least once every 2 weeks. So I want to continue that, but it's moving the plants to get you'd have to have almost like if you elevate. Either way, that's a topic of another conversation. We have an action-packed episode
yeah,
tonight
that's right.
with
We don't want
with
to go down a rabbit
yeah.
hole.
So again, we're going to get into all that stuff because it's important to talk about, and I know there's people out there that make the transition from soilless mixture to hydroponics, DWC specifically, and then run into these types of hurdles. So let's figure something out, and we'll kind of see if we can get to the bottom of that one. And lots of people in my life too, Pache, have been, reaching out. I've been having some conversations with some people on the back end. So, I've got some exciting things happening.
Some
So
irons in the fire.
yeah, so maybe more to come on that as we
Mm.
move forward. But really, we should be getting into environment, right?
Environment is everything, man.
That's such a key piece, right? I mean, we've worked kind of through the different parts that you need, the different tools that you need, and the tents and the lights and fans and things like that.
All the pieces.
Right. And all of these components, the purpose of buying them is to control the environment. So that's the ultimate goal, right? Plants grow naturally outdoors, and generally plants that grow outdoors have higher thresholds. They can take a larger amount of abuse, because it's the consistency of the environment outdoors that they get used to,
Mm.
and they can roll with Mother Nature as they move along, right? We don't necessarily get the same graces indoors. There's lots of benefits to growing indoors because you can specifically control your environment, absolutely. But if you don't do it correctly, you can really start to have problems. So that's the type of things we're going to get into, this episode here. And the big thing I want to say about environment first, there's nothing worse than getting so far into it, and then ending up with a plant that turns hermaphrodite, because of stress conditions in the environment. And just in case
Mm.
anybody's not aware of what a hermaphrodite is in cannabis, it's basically when a plant gets so much stress, it releases a enzyme. Basically, it's a defense. So the plant will pollinate itself. It'll grow a male pollen sac and pop that open and pollinate itself in an effort to continue its genetic for the following year. It's a defense mechanism that the plant uses. So you want to try to avoid that because one pollen sac in a grow room can do a big amount of damage and completely cause lots of problems with your crop. I mean, a lot of the time you can still process it into something else, but the seeds need to be removed. And if it's really bad, it can be a real difficult situation. You can get tons of seeds out of just one large flower. So just a few things that we wanted to touch on that, and that's what makes environment so important, and there's a couple of things in the environment that we have to control. The very first thing I guess we'll get into would be air temperature. A couple of things I wanted to touch on. With outdoors, like I said, it's the consistency of the environment outdoors, and it's the temperature swings in the day and the temperature swings in the late night and early morning hours. The plant gets adapted to that and gets used to that. So sometimes the temperature outdoors can swing from 50 degrees Fahrenheit to 90 degrees Fahrenheit, right? What's that in Celsius, Pache?
90 degrees Fahrenheit?
50 to 90, like 10 to 30 range, I guess, in Celsius.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
I'd say.
Okay. So
So
yeah,
up to 90, you're up to like 32 degrees Celsius.
yeah. I'm in the habit of talking in Fahrenheit. For our Canadian listeners, it's just something I don't know
Our
why.
Canadian
Just
listeners, I bet, can go back and forth pretty easy.
to be honest, when I was learning about growing, a lot of the information I was learning was from people on U.S. sites, and so I just kind of adapted the Fahrenheits for growing. But I know there's lots of people out there that talk in Celsius, so we'll try to get those numbers in, not to kind of over confuse everything. But yeah, 50 degrees Fahrenheit to 90 degrees Fahrenheit can be the swings outdoors or more. 10 degrees to 30 degrees Celsius here in the East Coast or more. So the plant gets adapted to that and can do quite well outdoors. With indoors, though, I'll be honest, the plant can take cold temperatures and the plant can take warm temperatures. They really can. But it's the swings between the two that really cause the biggest discomfort to a plant,
The
right?
stresses.
Yeah. So you want to keep your temperature swings quite tight. Indoors you're kind of looking at 65 degrees Fahrenheit to 76 degrees Fahrenheit, and that range is pretty much golden. That's about 18 to 24 degrees Celsius, for our people in Celsius. And basically people use, heaters and air conditioners to control the air temperature in a grow tent or a grow room, and they basically get controllers, right? And they just set the controller up in the grow room. I think Inkbird makes a pretty standard controller that a lot of people use. You connect a heater to one, you connect an air conditioner to another, and then you set the thresholds. And as your grow room gets outside of the parameters that you set, these devices will kick on to keep your air temperature within the range that you set. So a lot of automation happens with that. Some people do it manually, and that's fine if it works for you. But I just wanted to kind of touch a little bit about air temperature indoors, because if you're getting into the 60s, or low 60s, and then you're getting up into the high 80s, or if you're getting out, down to 14 degrees Celsius, up to 26 degrees Celsius, 27 degrees Celsius, that's something you got to watch. Those swings are just too much, and your plant will appreciate the consistency of the temperatures that you put in place, as opposed to those big swings. So
So you
just
say whatever you're growing at, you want to sort of stay within, let's say, 10 degrees of each other, no more than that.
Yeah, or less, a little less, even better. It's just you want to keep that tight, right? Your plant will thank you in the end, and it'll be a lot healthier not having to deal with big swings. So, just a few things about that, and another thing about the temperature of the water, right? That's something else you also have to be very careful of. A lot of the time, people are pouring fresh water and watering with it right away. And sometimes that stuff can be really cool. It can be, 10 degrees or something, and then you go into a 27-degree grow room and start watering. That can be a little bit stressful to the roots as well. So that's something else you want to consider. And if you're using water anyway, you should be waiting a period of time for the chlorine to evaporate off of the water, and we'll get into that another time. But I just wanted to hit the point on for hydroponics, for your reservoir temperatures, for your water temperatures. Um, you know, as low as 60 degrees Fahrenheit, because that'll give you the most amount of dissolved oxygen available in the water, the lower the temperature. But I wouldn't go lower than 60, because you could then get into a situation where your roots aren't growing as efficiently because the water's so cold. So anything over 74 degrees Fahrenheit, and you're basically starting to create the perfect environment for root rot. So 60 to 74 degrees Fahrenheit would be your range, and I wouldn't operate outside of that. And then, of course, that sums up air temperature. So with those thresholds, if you can't control that manually, I suggest that you get one of these controllers and get that working for you. Hang the sensor in your grow room and set your parameters, and then you wouldn't have to worry about this moving forward. Another thing, big thing. Lots of times, Pache, I can't tell you how many times somebody says to me, Ray, can you come over and have a look at my grow and give me some advice? And I walk in, and the humidity just hits you right in the face.
Yeah, that'll do it, man.
It's that's a big problem that I see, and your plants aren't happy when the humidity is way outside of whack. For vegetative growth, we kind of like to keep it around 60%. Usually a pretty good range, 55 to 60%. You can even go as low as 50. I'm in a situation now where I get to 45 sometimes in vegetative, and that doesn't seem to be too bad. But we'll monitor that.
And I suppose that's also dependent on the strain too, as well, right?
Yeah, exactly. And they don't, it's not actually humidity, right? It's called relative humidity. And that's the part that I guess we have to acknowledge, because as your temperature changes, the amount of water that the air can hold changes too. So that's why they call it relative humidity, because it's relative to the temperature. So, you can have humidity problems if your temperature is doing a big swing, right? And that can cause problems as well. So you want to keep an eye on that. If you're consistently running over 60% humidity, then you're going to welcome powdery mildew. And that's something that we'll talk about in airflow as well. But with powdery mildew, once you get it, it can be very difficult to completely eradicate. So you want to be really careful with that. And as long as you can keep your humidity within those parameters, then it's going to be difficult for powdery mildew to set in. And another thing too, right? The sensors, it's the quality of the sensors that you use. A lot of times, and I've done it myself, stop at the dollar store and pick up a humidity sensor and whatever the case may be, use it for something, and then only to come to find out that it's not accurate at all. It's giving you, it's 9% off or 12% off, and I see it all the time. So, environment's really important. So it's really important for you to have properly calibrated equipment and equipment that's designed to do the job. And Inkbird, and again, not sponsored by Inkbird in any way. It's just they're one of the companies that really took on to cannabis controls and sensors and whatnot for the home grower. And they sell relatively inexpensive, high quality equipment that's generally lasts quite a bit of time. So they've got the market, coiled up for sensors and whatnot. And I've purchased some of their equipment. I have a little hub, and I purchased different sensors, one for vegetative, one for flowering. And that information I can review remotely through the hub, through an app that's installed on my phone, and I can set thresholds, and it will alarm me if one of my variables for the environment gets out of whack, and then I can make an appropriate adjustment to get that done, right? So I do recommend stuff like that when you're fine tuning your environment, because getting accurate information is probably one of the most important things. There's nothing worse than getting inaccurate information and then you can't resolve a specific issue. And I've dealt with sensors myself that are, you get them brand new, but they are way off. Sometimes you can calibrate them to get them working. Sometimes, you don't realize it right away unless you have a secondary device to check that against. And that's something I've been doing a lot of, is having two different devices and just cross-referencing the two of them to make sure they're, within the same range. Which I think is an important to put on everybody's radar, right, when it comes to growing, to keep that stuff in mind, especially when you're, trying to fine tune variables. It's super important to make sure your equipment's calibrated. So,
Makes sense.
yeah. pH pen too. Make sure you're using storage solution when you're storing your pen, right? Because those probes, once they get dehydrated, they can become quite inaccurate, and that's something common as well that I see. So they specifically sell storage solution. Just on a side note, and the pens have caps on them that are actually designed to hold fluid, so you put them back on. And again, that's something we'll talk about. We'll do a device calibration kind of, segment moving forward, not to get sidetracked from humidity. But, for the most part, your humidity will get high, and then you'll have to use a dehumidifier to lower it down. Sometimes people, have to use, especially in like the West Coast of the U.S. or central U.S. In Canada and stuff, where the humidity is quite low. Sometimes people have to use humidifiers to humidify the air, but it's not as common as dehumidifiers because as the plants naturally respirate, they release moisture into the air. So having a way to get rid of that moisture is imperative. So most people do use dehumidifiers. Myself, I use one pot. Jay, you're using two.
Yeah, I've got two in my garage, and it's been so humid here in the Northeast that I've got both of them running right now. And sometimes what I'll do is I'll have one dehumidifier running, and I'll run the AC because one of them is an AC dehumidifier combo. So just try to keep the temperature in line as well as the humidity. It's that balancing act, right?
Absolutely. And it can cause a lot of problems if it's not monitored correctly, right? So powdery mildew and mold are the two ones that really get brought on by high humidity.
And some of the
There,
apps, like one of the apps that I use, it's I've got a sensor in my tent, and it keeps track of hourly, daily, weekly, monthly, and so if something happens, you can always go back and see, oh wow, I can see a spike overnight. Something happened.
right.
So these are good things not only for preventative, but for also going back and diagnosing. So yeah,
Right, yeah. With the Inkbird app that I have on my phone, I can download all the historical data, and it will show me a graph
I love it.
with the time frames in daily, weekly, monthly, and I can use that to look at the trends, just like you're saying there. So it's a great feature, and it really allows you to have a hard copy of the data as opposed to just looking at it. And it's easy to do, right? I mean, it's better than typing it into your phone every day when you go have a look and keeping track of the data manually. So good stuff there. Then, of course, another big thing, right? I mean, we breathe in oxygen and we emit CO2 when we breathe out, but plants do the direct opposite. Cannabis is no different, breathes in CO2, right? So if we don't have a constant supply of fresh air coming into the grow room, we have to supplement. Otherwise, the plant can't grow as efficiently as possible because it can't, breathe as quickly as possible. So CO2 is really important, and it does come in the fresh air, and for the most part, there's a half decent supply of CO2 in fresh air. So as long as you can keep the air moving through the tent pretty quickly, or your grow room pretty quickly, you can replenish that. Some people run a closed system though, and what a closed system is it does not bring in fresh air. It basically uses devices like a humidifier, dehumidifier, a heater, an air conditioner, and a CO2 generator, and does not take air in or out of the tent. The CO2 generator generates the CO2, and everything else is controlled by those devices. And that's quite popular for people that are big into CO2. They really have to really have a closed system in order to do it as efficiently as possible, especially if you're using CO2 tanks, because they can be cumbersome to go get and refill and get back and hook up, and it gets monotonous after a while. And depending on the size of your grow, sometimes those tanks can go pretty quick. So way to go in some cases is to use like a CO2 generator, which some people use to completely replenish it. But big part of the environment is CO2. The plants will generally like a higher concentration of CO2 once they get into flowering. And a lot of people that use CO2 will kind of get into it really heavy then. And they'll raise the ppms of CO2 to get the most efficient growth as possible. But one thing I noticed with working with CO2, Pache, is it likes, a higher temperature, right?
Yeah, I noticed that as well.
Outside of the normal threshold of what we're working with, right? It generally they want you to kind of turn it up a little bit, right? Make it a little bit warmer, and generally that gives you the best effect, right? Because it's like it needs a little more everything, needs a little more water, because that's the thing. Given the plant CO2 is going to allow it to kind of metabolize faster. And when it metabolizes faster, the byproduct of that is this is going to need more water. It's going to need more food. It's going to need additional things. Heat is one of them. Maximizes light efficiency is another one. So interesting things there. I wanted though you to kind of talk about the homemade generator that you kind of set up there, Apache. You want to take a second and
Yeah, absolutely. So if you look on the screen, so I picked up this little kit. It's a little CO2 generator kit off Amazon, 27 bucks. Again, not a sponsor at all, but I used it and I like it, and so I'm sharing it. And so all I do is I take two pop bottles, soda pop bottles, and empty, and then you put in the key ingredients are baking soda and citric acid. And so I ordered the citric acid online. Baking soda I picked up at Bulk Burn, and so 200 grams going into one bottle, and then another 200 grams of the citric acid going in the other, and then you pour in just water, 200 grams in the baking soda, so it's a 1-to-1 mix, and then 600 mils of water into the citric acid, so it's a 1-to-3 mix, and then you hook up this little unit here that I picked up, and it's got a pressure gauge on it, and it's got all the tubing you need, and you just run the tubing inside the tent, and then when it's time to go and the light comes on in the morning, because you don't want to run the CO2 generator at night, you want to run it while the light is on, and all the variables that you just described are in balance, and you turn the CO2 on, and the tent's all zipped up, of course. The temperature will rise, And I like to make sure that there's, lots of water in the soil, not soaked, of course, but enough to make sure that everything remains in balance in that environment. So if the CO2 goes up, light intensity can be increased, water can be increased, transpiration is going to increase, and the plants are going to get that extra, I don't know what, 5, 10% extra. And you keep adding 5 or 10% extra here and there and everywhere, you're going to have yourself a nice yield at the end.
Yeah, and I mean, I like these little types of setups. I've seen them commonly on the internet. There's other things like this that you can purchase. There's a premix that you kind of put together and you set them up in the grow room. I forget exactly what they're called right now.
Those little bags, those little CO2 bags.
Yeah, those are different ones. There's a couple of different kinds. Those ones are like organic material. So when you get the
Right.
bag, you kind of smush it all up, and it causes everything to get mingle in together, and the byproduct of the enzymes breaking down and the bacteria eating the stuff in the bag. The byproduct of that is
Bacteria
CO2.
farts.
Yeah, basically. And we capture that in the grow room. But hey, I mean, I've seen people use CO2 ppm readers, right? And I've seen some of them using these bags that you hang. And from what I can recall, I didn't see too much of a huge, increase in the ppm. So it's one thing. If you're going to get into messing around with CO2, it's probably smart to get a CO2 ppm reader, just because that way it'll give you the ability to know if what you're doing is actually working and worth your time and worth the ingredients. Because sometimes just buying a tank can be a little more efficient, or in bigger grows, like I said, generators you can use that can produce a mass amount. Either way, for most people that are growing indoors, a lot of the people are using fresh air, and that works. So if that's the case, you just keep doing your thing and bringing fresh air into the grow room. And that kind of brings me to the next topic, really, that we should start kind of moving through, and that's airflow. Another big thing, airflow in a couple of different regards, moving around the grow room or the grow tent, keeping the air moving so there's no stagnant patches of air. And then, of course, fresh air that's coming into the tent. So, if you're using a closed system, you're really not going to worry too much about air that's coming in or out of the tent, but you're going to worry about having fans inside that are going to keep moving the leaf surfaces around, and encouraging those stalks to get nice and thick so they can support your future weights. This little blurb is for the people that are using fresh air coming into the tent. And a lot of the times, airflow can be based upon the temperature in the tent, right? So you can adjust based upon temperature. But generally speaking, you're going to want an inline fan that's going to move about 150 CFM for a 2 by 2. If you have a small 2 by 2 tent, so 150 CFM, that's cubic feet per minute, and that's how most of, or that's how all of the fans are rated. So you would basically take your length by width by height, multiply those numbers together, and that's going to tell you how many per cubic feet you have in your area, and then you can match that up to one of the fans that they sell. Some of them are 4 inch, some of them are 6 inch, but for the most part, you're going to want something about 300 CFM for a 4x4, and 400 CFM for a 5x5. And one recommendation, right? If you're going to be using a carbon filter, which a carbon filter basically it uses activated charcoal to remove all of the cannabis aroma from the air. If you're going to be using, and they're quite popular with home growers, and if you're going to be using one, you need to take that into consideration, because once you install one to your inline fan, it's going to dramatically reduce, usually by 45% in that range. It's going to reduce your airflow. So it's always recommended to purchase one that, an inline fan that moves more air than required. So after you install, your carbon filter, you can still move the air necessary for your environment. So, just a few things I wanted to talk about there. And as if you have lots of airflow in your grow tent and all of the fan leaves are consistently moving under the airflow, it makes it very difficult for powdery mildew to set in because your leaf surface is constantly moving. So that's super important. I just wanted to hit a few of those topics. Pache, you brought me onto the AC Infinity, which I'm currently using. What led you to kind of purchase that one? I think I may have asked you this offline before. Not sure if I did it on the show.
Well, one of the things I am really enjoying about growing, like I'm just coming up on my first year, and I am the type of person where I love to research all my purchases. I love to research all my decisions. I love to just throw myself into it, and that's part of the fun, right? I love learning all about it, and I get a little obsessive, and I really spend too much time. And so I wanted something that was quality because quality is, one of the most important things with me. And so I wanted something with quality. It needed to control, and again, I know controlling the environment is everything. And I needed something that controlled the temperature and the humidity as well. And the AC Infinity seemed to be very popular with the reviews I saw online. And so yeah, I took the plunge and I ordered a 6 inch, and it's fantastic. I have to say, it does exactly what it promises to do. The only thing I sort of wish, and I don't know how you would ever be able to do this, but um, you know, it will tell you if it gets too high and the fan will come on. But let's say the temperature gets too low, a fan's not necessarily going to heat the environment up for you.
Right.
So although it's there, you can't solely rely on it. It's just a tool, and like any tool, it has limitations. But I really love it. I do recommend it.
Yeah, these AC Infinity fans. I did a little bit of research on the company when you first alerted me to them, and they were making these fans for other applications, and they started directing their inventory towards cannabis because the market was demanding them. Actually, so from what I had researched, they're working on software that's going to improve the usability of their devices specifically for cannabis, but they're just not quite there yet. So this inventory that we purchased is directed from other applications, not specifically for cannabis. So I
That's
wanted
great news.
to,
And so
yeah,
when they come out with that upgrade, we are going to be looking forward to testing that out for you guys.
yeah, it's just a software thing.
Oh,
That's all it is. We already have the ability to, with all the hardware.
oh,
It's
I
just a
love it.
software programming thing. So, more to come on that. It's probably already out there if we get into research in that. But one other thing I wanted to talk about here as well is air pressure, right? Doesn't really, I guess, matter too much if you're just drawing air through and you don't really care about the cannabis odors, and that's fine. If that's what floats your boat, by all means, that's definitely something you can
But
do.
not everybody's in that situation.
No, that's right. Most people want to minimize they don't want to broadcast to the neighborhood that they're growing cannabis. And when people kind of pop over for a visit, they want to not really have that on display. And I get it. So, for the most part, if you're going to be worried about the smell, you're going to need a carbon filter. And if you're going to be using a carbon filter, you're going to need a negative air pressure in your tent or your grow room for that matter. For the most part, the easiest thing to do is to use passive air intake. And all passive air intake means is if you look at the bottom of your tent, they have little rectangular flaps at the bottom of the tent, usually on two different sides. Those are passive air intake holes. So basically, it'll just allow the air in as needed. What I like to kind of do is when I zip up my tent, I kind of like to have the walls of the tent slightly start to incline, and that just kind of validates that I have a negative pressure. And I like to keep it just pretty much at that range. So that involves me turning down a fan speed controller to find the sweet spot, which is somewhere around medium on the large one that I have. But yeah, so maintaining a tiny little bit of a negative pressure, you'll see that by the walls of the tent slightly moving in. And what that does is it's forcing all of the air through the carbon filter and reducing all of the smell. If you're having humidity problems, your carbon filter is going to become less efficient, and you're going to start to get a smell. So you'll have to get your humidity under control, and these things lose their efficiency over time as well. I just wanted to say, and sometimes you can take them down and shake them a little bit, and restore them temporarily to work for another grow. So just a
Get the
few.
charcoal moving around a bit
Yeah, exactly. Get the surface of the charcoal. Do you know why they use charcoal?
because it absorbs the smell.
Yeah, in the surface area, if you look at a piece of charcoal under a microscope and look at the surface area on a piece of charcoal, they're extremely jagged, and there's a ton of surface area. And it's absorbent. So it was a perfect combination for this application. So
Sweet.
just a fun fact. And then, of course, we've talked about airflow, we've talked about air pressure, we've talked about the environmental controls for temperature and humidity. One thing kind of left here, and we'll put it under environment because it's something that's important and it's something that's needed, and you can have all of your other environmental metrics in check, and if you don't have this one under lockdown, you're not going to have much success, and that's nutrients. Myself personally, I have been using the Diablo series, the Micro Grow and Bloom. I read some great reviews online for Diablo, and because they're a Canadian company, again, not sponsored by Diablo Nutrients, guys, but because they were a Canadian company and because they did a lot of years of research and development into these products before they actually hit the market, my research really led them to me. I purchased their series, their Micro Grow and Bloom, and then I purchased the Monster Max, which is the beneficial bacteria aspect of the nutrient system as well. I've had some great success. When Pache reached out to me, Pache, hey, first thing I said, Diablo, here you go, and I sent you the link.
Yeah, and I was really struggling with some calcium deficiencies and cal mag deficiencies, and got me on to Diablo, and it was nice and easy. For a first time grower, it was sort of perfect. I didn't necessarily have a whole lot of time to devote to getting the feed schedule. Like I couldn't really go organic. This was just a lot easier for me, and man, I gotta say, there's no complaints. A pound and a half my first grow with 4 plants, and then basically another pound and a half my second grow with 2 plants. Like, yeah,
Yeah,
so I
those are
that's why I ordered the Monster Max, and you told me about that, and
yeah.
and I just got my Diablo carb, which is liquid molasses.
Yeah,
So
you've kicked this up a notch. You
yeah,
know,
well, I'm so impressed that I'm not going crazy now because you need to have your CalMag, so I decided to go with Diablo, um, and of course the Monster Max. I gotta say the artwork's pretty cool too.
yeah, I actually love the artwork. I've been shouting out Diablo Nutrients
I
on our
saw that.
Facebook page. Yeah, we'll see if they eventually scoop us up and say something. We'll keep that moving forward. You guys can monitor the status of that on our Facebook page at Plant Therapy Live. But yeah, so Diablo didn't let me down. I was very quick to recommend it to you. It didn't let you down,
Not at all.
right? So this is probably, of all the things we're going to talk about on this podcast moving forward, this is probably the thing you and I believe in the most.
I would say now the only thing because they have quite the product lineup now, like it's crazy. Like they have so many products, and so you get to a point where you start to wonder, like, is all of this really necessary? So I'm just sort of looking at what I started with the basic, the micro, the grow, and the bloom, and the cal, and that got me through my first 2 grows. And now on my third, I'm looking to branch out a little bit on the Monster Max and the molasses, the liquid carb. And if that goes well, maybe the next grow I'll throw in a little bit of frost.
And you make a great point there. I think that it's important that we just stop for a second and acknowledge this, right? There does come a point when you're buying into the hype, right?
Yeah.
And I've seen it happen with advanced nutrients. Over the years, it's just, you know, the plants need certain nutrients, right? As long as we can provide the nutrients and some additional, beneficial bacteria, I get it. Absolutely. Big fan of Monster Max for that purpose. I kind of view that as the Canadian equivalent to HydroGuard for me because it's really helped me avoid root rot. And in some situations, I've had reservoir temperatures that have gotten high. So,
Nice.
I do believe in some of these products. Are they all required? Well, I guess that's yet to be determined. Let's see now if you layer into this pache and now you add something else and you're going to grow again. We'll see what numbers you hit this time around. And if you're, landing on the moon here, then maybe these are beneficial and maybe the cost is irrelevant to add these things to the lineup to get the results that we're looking for. So we'll keep everybody closely involved in this moving forward. I know nutrients and what to get is a hot topic these days, so we'll keep everybody informed. But CalMag, yeah, that's a pretty standard one, right? Not generally in the very beginning, but CalMag sneaks up on everybody. Constantly see people posting in all the grow rooms and chat rooms and things online with CalMag deficiencies, looking for assistance. I went a different way. I'm using the base micro grow and bloom with Diablo, but I started adding a little bit of a powder supplement called Cha-Ching. And something else, I think it's called Open Sesame. Please forgive me, I forgot to capture the actual name of it from the package today before I left, but I think it's called Open Sesame. So I'm using a couple of phosphorus and potassium supplements there. And it seems to be working well. I got to say, with that mint chocolate chip this time around, that's the only difference between the last run and this run is the addition of these products. And wow. So I'll keep everybody updated on that as well. And feeding the plants, right? Scheduling, that's super important. Giving them nutrients is one thing, giving them the right amount of nutrients is another thing, right?
Hmm.
You don't want to get into giving your plants too many nutrients because you can shock them and you can cause lockout and then they'll start to show deficiencies and then you think to yourself, maybe they
They need
need more
more.
food. Maybe they need, right? That's a common thing. Oh, geez, it looks like a nitrogen deficiency. I think it's going to need more. Let me up it the next time, right?
Yeah,
You got
that's
to
right.
be
Oh,
very
maybe they need more CalMag.
right, and you got to be that's something that you got to be very, very close of, right? That's why you got to try to get you want to start low and work your way into it as opposed to just following nutrient schedules at 100% as soon as you crack open the bottle. If you're dealing with smaller plants, like for hydroponics, generally we cut if that nutrient you can use in soil and hydro, we cut the amount in half and start there. So, just a few things just to touch on, because things can get out of control with nutrients, and sometimes like I said, you burn your plants or you don't give enough, and then your plants start to starve. And then there's other things that can cause what look like deficiencies. Well, they really are deficiencies, but sometimes you're giving your plants the right amount of food and they're still showing a deficiency. And in your case, Pache, it ended up, basically becoming a severe pH issue, right? It's important to note, and maybe we'll get the graph and we'll put it on our website. But there's certain pH ranges where nutrient uptake occurs, right? And if you get outside of a pH of for hydro, it's about 5.5 to 6.5. If you get outside of that, even though there's nutrients in the water, the plant can't uptake it outside of that pH range. That's why the pH range is what it is for cannabis, is because that's where the nutrient uptake for those nutrients and micronutrients occur. And in your case, Pache, so it looked like deficiencies, right? But it was pH causing nutrient uptake issues. And can see as we were talking there, you've kind of located something on the screen. But we'll put that information on our website moving forward. But it's something to point out. So, you need to know what the pH is of your substrate that you're growing in. So you can do that by measuring the runoff of the water in soil. Know what the pH is going in and know what the pH is coming out. So it's important to know this, because if your substrate has too much of a high or low pH, then the nutrients that you're giving it are just being wasted and your plant is suffering. And until you identify that, it's never going to change. So very important, right? Other things that you need to really look at, and the things that you should be paying attention to when you're looking at your cannabis plants is, if you start to notice a deficiency, where is the deficiency? Is it on the bottom of the plant, the oldest growth of the plant, working its way from the bottom up the plant, right? Is it at the top of the plant, which could indicate something completely different? Is it happening on the oldest growth? Are fan leaves starting to drop off the plant as you move around it and start working on it? And a lot of these deficiencies have a unique tell. So when you kind of notice it, you can say, okay, all right, I see that this is a nitrogen deficiency. So if I'm going to identify a nitrogen deficiency, the very first thing that I'm going to look at is, number one, am I giving the plant nutrients? And if I am, then what is my pH? Number two, so if I'm giving my plant nutrients and the pH is within range, then I'm going to look at the ppm, or how much nutrients I'm giving the plant. And I'm going to potentially up that ppm in the nutrient solution because the plant is not getting enough. But you can work through the checklist. And as you do that, there's lots of resources online. It's very difficult for me to just go through verbally and just give a whole list of deficiencies and what they look like. You're never going to remember it if that happens. The biggest thing we can talk about is how to identify them, what type of things you're looking for, and then you can take that information to a search engine like Google, and there's thousands of resources online that show you exactly what the deficiencies look like, so, and helps you identify them. Pache, you got a great little system there for what do you do when you notice something is off?
Well, what I do is, first thing I do is I take pictures, and I take pictures of the front, the top, and bottom of the leaf. And then I go to Google. I go to sit down at my computer, and I go to Google, and I go to give me the top 10 or top 20. Well, usually I'll do the top 10 cannabis deficiencies, and then I'll open another tab, and then I'll start with, number one. Let's say it's calcium. I'll go cannabis calcium deficiency, and then I'll click on images. And so now I've just got a database of calcium deficiency images. And I start scrolling through, and does this look like what is on my phone? If no, then I move on to the next one, nitrogen, phosphorus. And I go right down the line until I finally stumble upon something. Okay, hang on, here we go. This is it. This is what I've got. Now I know what the problem is. I can spend my resources on solving it.
Right, and I mean that's perfect, right? You're identifying what it is, and you're using resources to kind of sync that up with and identify. That puts you in a situation. You've diagnosed it. Now you can prescribe a solution, right? In some cases, maybe you've identified a deficiency because it needs more food, and something like that is important to note. If you're going to run that same genetic via a clone, the next run,
Hmm.
that's important information to know. Okay, it's
Yeah, yeah.
day 27 of flowering, and I've noticed this deficiency. So next time, second week of flowering, nutrients I'm gonna up the ppm to 200, ppm the next time around, so my plant doesn't have to show me that anymore.
Right.
And that's important information to log. And if you've got the basics down and you're really looking to take your grow game to the next level, this is the information that you should be paying close attention to. And this is the information that's going to set you aside from the rest of the pack. So let's share this together. Let's share our wins. Let's share our failures as we move through. But as we all kind of get together each week, hopefully we'll be able to share information and get some habits down that allow us to identify the resources that we need at the time that we need them. And we'll be successful. So we did talk about kind of how to get that information, and you gave us an idea of the system that you need there. One thing I want to do talk about is, if you have everything in check and your plants are really starting to grow and they're really starting to take off, they're going to require more food. That's a given. So if you're sitting back and you're doing all the right things and you notice this time around, wow, are they ever growing this time? Like in a week, they've doubled in size, and another week, they've doubled in size. If you want to keep that momentum going, you're going to have to be paying attention to that, because the bigger the plants get, the more food they're going to need. And that's just a fact. So you want to be standing there with those nutrients and micronutrients available when your plant needs it. Otherwise, you're going to lose that momentum
And
moving
keep a
forward.
journal. I highly recommend keeping a journal. Like I'm just bringing mine up here on the screen now, and yeah, so I have entries every day and a color
Exactly.
code.
Exactly. It's easy sometimes to kind of get back on track in vegetative growth, right? If you run into a problem,
Hmm.
you've had some momentum, the plant's got so big now, all of a sudden, that what you've been doing for nutrients isn't enough, and you got to take some time and diagnose that, and then up your A game, and then, get them back on track. Sometimes you got that week or two in vegetative growth that you can afford to lose to get things back on track. You don't have that same grace in flowering.
Yeah, absolutely. And also photo period versus auto.
Right. Like, exactly. Another great point, right? You got to think of this through vegetative growth through week one, it's that train going down the track and it's starting to gain some momentum, right? And then it's week two, it's like, boom, you're hitting all the things, you're hitting all the things, you're hitting all the things. And this train just keeps going and going. By the time you hit your first week of flower, you want this thing going strong, right?
Hmm.
You want to be there, you want to support the plant, you want to allow that plant to gain the momentum that it needs and keep pushing, right? Otherwise, it's all for nothing. We don't, here's what we want to do here. We want to take average Joe and turn him into savage Joe, right?
Ooh, I like that.
And that's the key, right? And paying attention to the finer details of this stuff is what you need to be doing in order to take this to the next level. Pache, we still got a few minutes here. Let's get into styles of growing,
Sure.
because this is a big thing, right? We've talked about our how to identify a deficiency. We talked about our nutrients. We've now talked about the environment and kind of how to control that, and the parameters that we set to kind of make cannabis as happy as possible. Now, once this is all going and the plants are in the tent or in the grow room, we've got some options that we can do to help support the plant with some different growing techniques. So you're going to review a few of them here.
That's right. So now I will talk a little bit about a few different training styles, low stress and high stress training. And then I will talk mostly about what I like to do, because really it's our show. So, low stress is more like your training. So typically, a cannabis plant will grow straight up like a Christmas tree. And the top cola is going to be the highest quality, and the stuff on the bottom that gets the least amount of light is going to be the lower quality. So, what a lot of people like to do is they like to try to grow more horizontally instead of vertically. And so, to start with that, they will start to bend the plant over. Some will actually, and I've seen YouTube videos, some will actually like crack the plant so it's 90 degrees, and that is dangerous and insane, but I've seen it work. And the whole idea is you want to have more than one cola. You want as many colas as you can have, because that's where the quality is. So you start with bending and tying. So and you start touching and pushing the plant over, and you tie it down. You tie it to the pot. You tie it to whatever you can, and you also like to do something called super cropping, which involves sort of pinching and using your two fingers of each of your hands and sort of twisting the stem of the plant. Sometimes you can do it so much that you can hear a crack, and so that's the breaking of the inner herd, which is just a part of the interior of the plant. And now the outer herd remains intact, and so that's why the plant doesn't just fall over. But what happens there is it's almost like, and this is how I equate it in my head. It's almost like when a bone breaks and it heals and and the calcification of where the break occurred becomes very, very strong. And so it's the same sort of process, the same sort of process with supercropping a plant. And when you break the inner herd and it heals, sometimes it will heal like a bit of a knuckle, and it becomes very strong. And it's just going to help the plant grow bigger and stronger and allow the nutrients to flow.
May I interrupt for one sec?
Yeah, absolutely.
Just because they sell these things now called LST clips. I
LST
per
clips.
LST clips. I purchased some from a guy named Kyle in one of the growing sites. He 3D printed them and shipped them to me.
Ooh.
They're great, I have to say. Just because you're talking about super cropping, and these things here, you just basically put the clip on and fold the stem around the clip, and they make the same knuckle, but it's a little less stressful than actually crushing, the branch, like kind of what you were talking about, which is what I would do. I do that all the time, but I just wanted to point out the fact that there are LST clips available. If
That's
you
interesting.
yeah, if you Google search them, you'll be able to find them, and good luck with them. I've used them. I just wanted to interject with that. Sorry to knock you off
No, no,
your
no.
thing there.
Listen, it's all about contributing to each other and learning. So that's fantastic. You know, anything that you can find that's going to make your life easier with growing, because it takes a lot of time and effort, man, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's great. And before I go on, there's also something called like pinching and fimming. And fimming is an acronym called, which means fuck, I missed. So pinching and topping. Um, so topping a plant is removing the top of the plant. And you do that because there's little things on the side, like the plant grows up straight, and then there's two fan leaves that shoot out each side. And right where the fan leaves meet the stem is growth. You'll see leaves start to form, and that's the auxiliary buds. And those are going to be the new main stems. So you cut the top off the plant, and those two auxiliary buds are now your new mains, and they're going to grow, and they're going to be it's going to be leading the plant growth from this point forward. And so sometimes people will, instead of topping, they will go attempt to top, and then they will just about get it, but they'll miss, and they'll only get maybe 75 or 85% of the top, and they'll leave a little bit behind. Now that seems to be a bit less stressful than just topping with pruning shears or something like that, or snips. And so the plant seems to do a little bit better with that. Now, myself, I like to just top, and each time I do, I sterilize my tools. You want to jump in there, Ray?
Yeah, I want to jump in just on fimming there because it's a technique I've used outdoor many times over the years. One thing that sets fimming away from topping is not all the time, but like it's difficult to get a good film, right? You don't hit it all the time. You can try to film, and but you don't have 100% success. But when you hit one, let me tell you, what it does with the plant is actually crazy. It's like you topped all the other branches, so it causes all kinds of offshoots and shoots up and everything. It's like, but it doesn't happen all the time. But when it does, look out. It causes explosive growth. I've had that bite me in the butt a few times because it just caused the foliage to get so big. I wasn't feeding it the right amount of nutrients at the time. All lessons learned over the years. Also, though, when you hit a good FIM, or if you're topping a lot, your plant is going to get a lot denser, and you're going to want to make sure you keep thinning them out. You got to keep that air moving through the center of them. The more you film, the more you top, the more you manifold. Everything is you're going to cause a thicker, foliage within the plant in any of those methods. And a lot of these are used to support sogging, which is sea green, or scrogging, which is my favorite, which stands for screen of green,
It's also my favorite now too.
which is the next topic I think you're going to talk about there, Apache.
Yeah, so I use a combination of techniques, and I use topping to accomplish something called mainlining or manifolding, which is a style that sort of has been created by a guy called Nug Buckets, which I highly recommend you check out online. And so, what he believes and what he has sort of proven actually is you want not tall plants, but sort of short and wide plants. And if you look here, so this is a picture of my four recent plants, my purple kush, and this is just before I topped them. And so there, you can see that there's nice healthy leaves. They're growing. They're looking nice and bushy. Everything was looking perfect. And then I come along and I do this, and I cut the top off, and then I cut all the leaves and auxiliary buds off underneath it. Like this was really radical, and for my first time growing, it was really hard for me to sort of do it. And but I had faith that this was the right style. And so what happens is the auxiliary buds, when the canopy is full, all the bud sites are all equidistant from the roots. And so the nutrients will all travel the same sort of distance to get to all the buds. And the idea here is to make the canopy uniform. And so it's supposed to increase yield and increase the quality because more bud sites are hitting the photons from the light. So this is what it looked like before. And so let's see.
It's crazy to see. It is. In the beginning, when you were telling me about it, I was like, you might want to, who's this guy? You might want to think about that, man. Let's get your first grow under your belt first. But yeah, this paid off for you big time. It's something that I'm going to get into trying as well. But to see it actually happen on the screen it's something else. Like you say, it's difficult to do, right? To fresh babies, but the
Especially when you
results,
don't have
it makes
the
sense though. It
background.
makes it makes sense, right? Because I can see exactly by
The theory
creating,
sound.
yeah, by creating so many main stems in the very beginning, then yeah, absolutely, the nutrients will all travel the same distance. That makes perfect sense. Definitely worth more than just a few minutes of a thing in tonight. This is something we're going to talk about at length.
And this photo here that's on the website, I mean, this is the end result, right? So this is what topping and manifolding did for me right here.
Right.
And so this is me just starting to tie these. You can just see where I'm using two garden ties to tie down the auxiliary buds that have now grown about an inch and a quarter. And these are going to be supporting, you know, hopefully pound and a half type flowers. And so I'll keep bringing up some photos here. So there we go. There's another little bit more of a close up. And so I just, I held on to the base so the base didn't break, and I just very slowly started to bend it over, then bring it back, bend it over, then bring it back. And when you start to do that, the stem will start to work with you, and it'll start to slowly bend over easier and easier and easier until it'll let you basically bend it over horizontally. And then I've got the garden ties there to keep it like that. And the older it gets, the older the plant gets, the sort of the harder that stem is going to become, and I won't need ties anymore soon.
Nice.
Yeah, so I'm gonna keep throwing photos up here. So you can see the pest strips, the diatomaceous earth, and so I'm now training all of these plants. So you can see the main stem has now been cut, and now I've got two main stems that I'm now training to grow horizontally. And so eventually these will sweep up. I'll top them again, and then I'll top them again, and then they'll eventually grow into this great big net, the net of joy.
Awesome. So more to come on these weekly updates. We'll be looking into these pictures as we move forward, and definitely we're going to talk about manifolding. We're going to talk also about scrogging and sogging again. We just wanted to hit the basics in the very beginning here, just to kind of get it out there. But as we get through these podcasts with a lot of the starting information, we're going to hit all these points first. We're going to talk a little bit about them, and then the most important things as we move forward, we're really going to drill into those with some more in-depth discussions, and get to the point where we can start to bring in other growers as well, which is something that we're going to look at after getting some more of these episodes recorded, just to get some different perspectives, some different styles, and to share information with everybody that may be listening. So it does look like we've ran way over time here tonight, Pache.
Oh yeah, wow, that's fine
Two,
though.
two Gabby Cathys here. So I look forward and I'm excited now to look at what we're going to muster up here for next week, but we're going to keep things moving forward. Maybe what we'll do is we'll talk about micro growing and we'll talk about guerrilla growing. And then maybe next week we'll just break down manifolding, sogging, scrogging, micro growing, guerrilla growing, and find something else to add to the mix. Just to touch on these topics, everybody knows the information that we have here. Anything else you can think of last minute for tonight?
Uh, no, the only thing I really want to know, and I know you're not going to mention anything tonight, but the big news. What is this big news that's going on?
Well, we'll see. Well, we'll see. We'll just keep
I
moving
know you don't want to let
forward.
the cat out of the bag, but
No, hey, we'll see. We'll just we'll keep going. It looks like we picked up a sub on Twitch as well. Foregathers, shout out to you. Just wanted to say thank you for the sub on Twitch.
welcome.
And so next week we're going to get back on track with the time frame, Paul. Right?
Yes, that's right. Anniversaries
Okay.
only come once a year.
All right, so we are going to be live at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time or 8 p.m. Atlantic Standard Time. Once again, my name is Ray,
And I'm Pache.
and you can check out our website at www.planttherapy.live, and we will talk to you all again next week. Take care.
Have a good week.